17 killed, 25 injured in Lagos pipeline explosion. Covid-19 affects import-dependent businesses in Nigeria. On the international scene, coronavirus shuts down ways of life across the globe, tales of war everywhere. And in sport, Real Ishaku replaces Ubo Idris as NPPF president.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. People of Abule-Ado in Amuwo-Odofin local government area of Lagos State went to sleep on Saturday night like any other residents of Lagos. But by morning, their lives have been turned upside down, filled with sorrow and wailings. Many had died and scores injured when an oil pipeline exploded, incinerating some of its neighbors. In the aftermath, 20 residents had died and 70-plus buildings destroyed, including schools, churches, hotels, and warehouses. Director General of Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, Dr. Femi Oke-Osaitolu, gave the details at the site of the explosion. It was also learned that the Catholic Church-owned Bethlehem Girls' School in the area was charred and demolished by the fire. The principal of that school, Reverend Sister Henrietta Alokwa, was said to have died in the explosion. Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Mele Kwari, says gas leakage from activities around the oil pipeline caused the explosion. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has instructed the Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency, LASEPA, to immediately furnish residents of the explosion vicinity and all safety workers on ground with personal safety equipment, including face and nose protection masks. Sanwo-Olu has also advised to residents to stay at a safe distance from the explosion site to avoid inhaling polluted air. The governor also announced at the scene on Monday, 2 billion naira would be given as relief aid to affected residents. And vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in last year's general election, Peter Obi, described as sad the death of Bethlehem Girls College principal, Reverend Sister Henrietta Alokwa. Obi said Alokwa died when caving roof fell on her. He expressed condolences on her death and those of others in the tragedy. Meanwhile, the Action Democratic Party, ADP, has called for an investigation into the pipeline explosion. The party described the multiple deaths and the destruction of properties in the explosion a national tragedy. The party's National Publicity Secretary, Prince Adelaja Adeoye, said in a statement on Monday, there is necessity for a thorough investigation. The party says the frequency of disasters like midnight market fires, explosions, and other tragedies across the country was a serious concern and is unacceptable. Lagos was not the only place where explosion and fire occurred on Sunday. Goods worth millions of naira were destroyed in the early morning hours of Monday when fire ravaged Otukpo main market in Benue State. Many shops were also razed. The fire service was praised for quick response that stopped the fire from consuming more goods and shops. Otukpo LGA Chairman George Ali said a team is on ground taking an account of the extent of the damages. There was a lull in the frequency of attacks on the burning Gwari-Kaduna highway for a little while, but it appears armed bandits have begun again their violent attacks on travelers on the highway. The bandits were suspected of killing, kidnapping, and injuring travelers on that highway over the weekend. Some residents of Burning Gwari said some of the kidnapped victims on Saturday were students returning to Burning Gwari from Kaduna. They had just taken the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination. They identified one of the victims killed in the attack as Adamu Shekarau, who was driver for a former member of the House of Representatives. The bandits were reported to have returned to the highway on Sunday evening. 3 other persons were killed and an unconfirmed number kidnapped in that attack. COVID-19 is disrupting business and life around the world. The African continent is fortunate to have very few cases, but the virus is also finding ways to interfere with business and daily lives of Nigerians. Import-dependent businesses are feeling the pinch as supply chains dry up. Ifyok Etang has the story from Jos.
Chidi Ebere says almost 90% of the mobile devices at his phone store are made in China. Until last December, business was good. Ebere says if things don't return to normal soon, his business in the Nigerian city of Jos might not last another 6 months.
It has not been business as usual. The sales have dropped. To get the product, at times even when you have the money, where to get the product is a problem. The scarcity of the commodity has made it to skyrocket with over 60%.
Other import-dependent businesses like this textile shop are also feeling the impact of the outbreak.
Like this gum stain now, this gum stain for fabric. Before we used to sell it 14,000. Due to the coronavirus that's affected China, they have to be selling it 17,000, 18,000. Here we sell 19,000.
The outbreak of the coronavirus epidemic has adversely impacted the world economy, causing disruptions in stock markets and supply chains globally. According to the Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics, Chinese goods accounted for over $3.3 billion of imports in the third quarter of last year, far more than any other country. But now, the outbreak of COVID-19 threatens import figures. Nigeria's economy depends heavily on proceeds from crude oil exports. With the recent decline in oil prices and concerns over the virus, many analysts fear Nigeria may be heading for another recession.
The current market position is about $32 per barrel. That's almost a shortfall of about 40%. And the effect of this is that there may be more strikes, there may be no productivity, and many things can come to a standstill in the country. And that will mean so much negative impact to the economy.
Nigeria's government says it will trim its 2020 budget to accommodate for the decline in crude oil prices and the effects of COVID-19. But for small-scale business owners like Ebere, they can only hope for some relief soon.
Coming up, African stories. We will wrap up the coronavirus situation across the continent. And later, international news. Many countries are trying to adapt to new ways of life in the wake of devastating coronavirus pandemic.
You are watching ANN.
You heard them yourselves, folks. Thousands of fans from across Nigeria have come together to witness the global phenomenon. It's the artist ruling the airwaves, the one with a voice that makes the continents dance. Brace yourself for a performer like no other. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the sensational pop vocalist of this generation. It's the legend. It's it's you.
We're going up, we're going
You watching. You are the yellow star the world is waiting for. MTN Yellow Star needs you.
Yellow, yellow star.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now let's join Lucy Adeyemi for stories making news around the continent.
The Ghanaian government has announced a list of measures to control COVID-19. Some say this may effectively put the country on a lockdown. Ghana announced 6 confirmed cases of coronavirus on Sunday. President Nana Akufo-Addo says public gatherings, including conferences, sporting events, political rallies, funerals, and religious gatherings are suspended for the next 4 weeks. All universities and schools have also been closed indefinitely. The president said in a late-night address on Sunday the new measures are for public safety and protection of the population. Ministries of Information and Communication have been charged to roll out distance learning programs. Several African countries have imposed far-reaching restrictions in a bid to curb the spread of coronavirus. The measures imposed in Ghana are similar to what Senegal, Rwanda, Ghana and South Africa have put in place: a ban on public gatherings, closure of schools and other public places, and a big emphasis on preventive measures. At least 26 African states have so far been affected by the virus. Most confirmed cases involve persons arriving from Europe and North America. Djibouti, which has no confirmed case, has suspended all international flights. Tanzania also has no confirmed case and has cancelled flights to India. Morocco, which has 28 confirmed cases and 1 death, has also suspended all international flights from its airport. Libya's Prime Minister of internationally recognized government Fayez Sarraj also announced the closure of Libya's airspace and land borders as a preventive measure starting from today, Monday. Other countries that have announced border closures include Algeria, Tunisia, and Mozambique. The World Health Organization has declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Now that the coronavirus infection rate has hit 61 in South Africa, the country has announced a broad range of measures to stem the spread of the disease in the country. 55 land entry points and 2 seaports have been shut down effective today. President Cyril Ramaphosa has also declared a state of disaster, so disaster management will be able to work on reducing the impact on the nation. A travel ban will also be activated on Wednesday that will deny entry visas to heavily affected countries. Visas already issued to citizens of those countries will be cancelled. The government is also banning gatherings of more than 100 persons, and schools will be closed from Wednesday until after Easter holidays. For the next 30 days as well, the government has cancelled visits to the prisons. Namibia has cancelled its independence celebration that was scheduled for next weekend after confirming 2 COVID-19 cases. Health authorities say 2 persons arriving from Spain introduced the virus into the country. The government has announced that money it had earmarked for the country's independence celebrations will now be spent for fight against the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Although President Hage Geingob will be sworn into his second term in office, all other celebrations involving large gatherings and all flights to Namibia from Qatar, Ethiopia and Germany have been suspended for 30 days. Ethiopia has also joined the list of African countries that have confirmed COVID-19 cases. The country health ministry announced its first case over the weekend. It said a 48-year-old Japanese who had entered Ethiopia from Burkina Faso tested positive for the disease earlier this month. Ethiopia becomes the second East African nation to have the disease after Kenya, which announced its index case on Friday. The government says it has put in place a set of precautionary measures to combat the disease. It also said in a tweet confirming the COVID-19 case, it was time for Ethiopians to begin practicing good hygiene.
When we return, international news. Many countries are trying to adapt to new ways of life in the wake of devastating coronavirus pandemic. And later, sport. Raul Ishaku replaces Ubo Idris as MPPF president.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, it's another week and COVID-19 crisis is still with us, adding more uncertainty and fear around the world. Rising death tolls in Italy is quite worrisome as officials report fatalities caused by the disease is now close to 2,000. Italian authorities say a jaw-dropping 368 deaths on Sunday alone. The 3 states bearing the brunt of the coronavirus pandemic in Europe have all recorded highest daily death tolls this weekend. Italy's caseload has toppled 24,000 and citizens remain essentially under house arrest. They were singing from their rooftops, balconies and windows to express solidarity with each other. Spain has its work cut out as well. Officials there reported close to 8,000 cases of coronavirus and fewer than 300 deaths. The country has ordered all residents to confine themselves to their homes and to leave only to buy food, go to work, seek medical care, or assist older people and others in need. The Spanish government says it would probably extend the state of emergency and keep people indoors beyond the initial period of 15 days. The streets of Barcelona were empty on Sunday as the Spanish government ordered almost everyone to stay indoors. And the French government has announced the closing of all non-indispensable businesses, including restaurants, bars, and movie theaters. The number of French cases was more than 5,000, with 100+ deaths on Sunday. Other countries in Europe also began taking more serious measures. Germany is ready to close its borders with Austria, Denmark, France, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. Palestinian Authority spokesman Ibrahim Melhem says 3 more coronaviruses were confirmed in the occupied West Bank on Saturday, raising the total number of infections to 38, forcing the country to declare a state of emergency. Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity was shut down while the Israeli army sealed off the city. Public parks, tourist sites, schools and educational facilities have closed and all major gatherings, including sporting events and conferences, have been cancelled. The Islamic Authority that oversees Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem has also announced that State Mosque and Dome of the Rock will close their doors to worshippers as part of measures aimed at curbing the spread of Covid-19. Mosques across the occupied West Bank called through loudspeakers for Muslims to perform the regular daily prayers at home rather than at mosque, aiming to restrict large gatherings. Meanwhile, Israel's health ministry announced on Sunday 200 Israelis have so far tested positive for coronavirus. And as Americans are asked to isolate themselves, the United States has stepped up plans to isolate itself from the world, with travelers from Britain and Ireland joining the list of other European countries barred from entering the country. The bans have left hundreds of thousands of travelers scrambling to get back to the United States. American airports were overwhelmed over the weekend, with thousands crowded closely together while waiting for hours to pass through customs. And New York City is closing down the nation's largest school system. All restaurants and bars would also close, limiting those outlets to takeout and food delivery only. 2 days after President Trump declared the coronavirus crisis a national emergency, the Federal Reserve on Sunday slashed interest rates to near zero. Meanwhile, several nations in South and Central America closed their borders in the latest moves to combat coronavirus spread. And nations in South and Central America have ramped up measures to contain the infection, with Panama banning entry of non-resident foreigners and Honduras closing its borders to passengers traffic for a week. Leaders of Argentina and Peru also announced border closures on Sunday to curb coronavirus. Argentina has announced its borders closure for 15 days to non-residents. Public and private schools classes would also be suspended until end of March. National parks would be closed. Peruvian President Martin Vizcarra announced Peru would also close its borders, suspending air and sea transport. He called on citizens to self-quarantine for 15 days to help slow the infection. Australia also joined the United States in self-isolation of arriving foreigners as New Zealand's central bank slashed interest rates by 75 basis points to a record low on Monday following an emergency meeting. With the World Health Organization declaring Europe the epicenter of the pandemic that originated in China, governments across Europe have responded by curbing the movement of their citizens and tightening borders. Germany is imposing controls on its borders with France, Switzerland, Austria, Denmark, while Portugal will clamp down on its frontier with Spain. Countries within Europe are also closing themselves off. The Czech Republic, Cyprus, Denmark, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland and Slovakia have all isolated themselves from foreigners. And Germany, the economic engine of the continent, said it will partly close its borders with 5 neighboring countries. The Czech government has introduced stringent lock measures. People will only be allowed to go to and from work and buy food or medicine. They would also be able to make urgent family visits. Otherwise, free movement will be severely curtailed until next Tuesday. Austria is banning gatherings of more than 5 persons from Monday, and the Republic of Ireland is asking pubs to shut down until month end. Schools will also be closed across many European states. Up next, sports. Ruel Ishaku emerges as NPPF president. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. Nigeria's gold medalist at the 2008 Beijing Paralympic Games, Ruel Ishaku, has been elected president of the Nigeria Powerlifting Federation. Ishaku replaces Queen Ubo Idris, who was impeached and banned from all powerlifting activities. Ubo Idris had been at loggerheads with both the board and the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sport Development over her handling of the federation's programs and finances. Tyson Fury and his team have been accused of bribing a farmer in an attempt to cover up drugs cheating 5 years ago. The claim centers around failed drug tests for both Tyson and his cousin in 2015. At the time, the Furies blamed the positive test on uncastrated wild boar meat or contaminated supplement. Ultimately, Tyson Fury accepted a backdated 2-year ban before being allowed to resume his boxing career in 2017. Lancashire farmer Martin Carefoot now claims he was offered 25,000 euros, which was never paid, to lie about supplying the Fury family with wild boar meat. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.